Welcome back. Religion on the Line. I'm Rabbi Joseph Potasnik.
And I'm Rabbi Diana Gerson.
And now we go to the conference line and speak to someone I refer to as Rebbe. You know, there's a rabbi, there's a Rebbe. A Rebbe is one with whom you share a very personal relationship, not just one who expounds on Jewish law, Jewish theology, but one who also has a very, very human side to him. And I can't think of anyone who exemplifies that kind of dimension than Rabbi Avi Weiss, the founder and president of Yeshiva Chovevei Torah Rabbinical School, and a recipient of, I remember when he received the Finkel Prize, Rabbi of the Year, and a great teacher. Rabbi Weiss, good morning to you.
Good morning, Joe. It's wonderful to be here. I am the founding president of Chovevei Torah, but Rabbi Asher Patton, great rabbi, is now the president. But I'm also the founding president of Yeshivat Maharat, which is a school which ordains women to become spiritual leaders and full members of the clergy. So this has been a wonderful time, Joe.
Yeah, and what's interesting is there's been no controversy about it. You haven't received any criticism by anybody for it. It's just kind of gone unnoticed, huh?
You know, when I was, after I finished my first year in the rabbinate, I was in St. Louis, and a person got up, one of my Hasidim, one of my fans, and said, "Rabbi, I bless you, you should have many enemies." And I went up to him, I said, "You're my friend. What do you mean by that blessing, that I should have enemies?" And he said to me something, Joe, I've never forgotten. He said, "You know, if you go through life and you've never had an enemy, what it means is that you haven't done anything." So I have fulfilled his blessings. I don't like the word enemy. There are people with whom I've respectfully disagreed with. But God willing, everybody's trying to do their share to make the Jewish people better, and beyond that, to really make a contribution to the larger world.
Well, one of the things I have found with you over the years is that there are those who may have criticized positions you have taken. That hasn't diminished your commitment to the position, but it also hasn't inspired in you a hostility to the person. I've never heard you indulge in any ad hominem attack. I've always, found that you're one who focuses on the merits of the argument. Let's talk about the issue. Let's not, personalize this. And that's what makes, I think, you very, very special to so many. And how many times have I've been with you, and many others have been with you at demonstrations where you put yourself in a very dangerous place. And that, again, it doesn't deter you from doing what you think is right. You've written about spiritual activism. And one of the things I find, talking about Martin Luther King, there are people out there like yourself who recognize the dangers but will not, be silent. What is it within you that really elicits that kind of response?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it all comes, and I think all human beings possess within them the image of God. And part of having godliness is it brings forth a love of one's own people, a love of all people. And one of the greats who I think lived that life was the great Dr. Martin Luther King of blessed memory. And tomorrow night, right at our synagogue here in Riverdale, we commemorate and we celebrate his birthday and his life. It's tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in Riverdale, right here at our synagogue. And I was very taken by him, Joe, when leading his people in the 60s, he found the time and courage to speak out on behalf of Soviet Jewry. Mm-hmm. And many of his advisors, Joe, told him, "Don't do this. You should be completely absorbed with the challenges facing your brothers and sisters, African Americans." And he spoke out. He spoke out in the most powerful terms in December of 66. I just want to read to you two sentences, Joe, if I may. Mm-hmm. He said the following: "Let us continue to make our voices heard and our righteous protests felt. We cannot sit complacently by the wayside while our Jewish brothers in the Soviet Union face the possible extinction of their cultural and spiritual life. Those who sit at rest, while others take pains, are tender turtles, and by their quiet with disgrace." I love that last sentence. Those who sit at rest while others take pains are tender turtles, and by their quiet with disgrace. That's a great man who lived the motto of Hillel. Hillel said, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I am only for myself, what am I? That is what Dr. King was all about, and his memory, may it be a blessing. We'll be celebrating tomorrow night, and I hope many who hear my voices will come up and join us.
You know, I find there are people in this world, and you know them as I do. Rabbi Diana, you've come across them in your work on behalf of many of the women's issues. There are those who have this parochial lens, and they'll only address something that pertains to their own community, their own people, but they won't look at the larger picture. And then when others are not there to speak for them, they say, you see, nobody else cares. You know, it's, for example, I see someone who won't come to a minyan, a service, during the week. And yet when that person has to remember a loved one at a yurt site and comes and there's no minyan, they say, well, why don't others come out? I need a minyan tonight. You can look at life that way, unfortunately. It's only what's good for me or my group and not what's good for others. And I think, again, we talked of collective responsibility. King spoke stood up for Israel, stood up against anti-Semitism, stood up for Soviet Jewry. We talked about persecuted Christians. We talk about a host of things that aren't directly related to the Jewish world, the general world, but if you really want to be called religious, you have a moral mission to speak out on a host of issues.
Yeah, I would distinguish, Joe, between what I would call pragmatic doing on behalf of the other, and I think that relates to what you spoke about, and that is I do, because I expect you to do for me. But from my perspective, we should all be yearning and reaching for, and I think this is who you are, and that is doing because it is the right thing to do. I've always felt, going back to an earlier comment that you made just now, that a strong sense of national consciousness does not contradict my responsibility to the larger world, but it is a prerequisite to it. So I'm a very proud Jew. I'm proud of my national identity. I'm proud of being an Orthodox rabbi, but that in no way should cut into my responsibility to a larger world. As a matter of fact, I think it jettisons me, and as a matter of fact, it helps me live a life of universal consciousness. That's why we in Orthodox synagogue, we could celebrate the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. We understand the intersection between what we are uniquely about, our uniqueness, and with the vision of Dr. King as well.
We're speaking with Rabbi Avi Weiss, founding president of Yeshivat Chavavei Torah, and I'm curious to know, you have certainly been a role model for spiritual activism your entire rabbinate. How do you seek ways to inspire the next generation to speak out, to actually act in a way that will make our world a better place?
I think there are a couple of steps. The first step is to really let all people understand that we all possess the image of God. That's what makes the human being unique. And as God is a God of mercy and kindness, so too do we, created in the image of God, in the spirit of imitatio Dei, what's called in Hebrew, V'alachta b'drachav. Do we have the capacity to reach for that goodness and for that kindness on behalf of the other? And I teach a second lesson, and the second lesson is that being created in the image of God, we have the capacity to reach beyond our grasp, and this touches the whole idea of covenant. We're in a partnership relationship with God. God purposely did not create a complete world. The last word of the creation story is the word lasot, to do, where God says, I've created this beautiful world. Now you, turning to humankind, turning to the Jewish people, turning to all people, God says, now you, in partnership with me, let's work together to bring about redemption.
Rabbi, you're also the founding, as we mentioned earlier, founding president of Yeshiva Ma'arat, and you took a very strong step in promoting women in the Orthodox world to assume greater responsibilities. That didn't come without criticism, obviously. Talk about that development. Talk why it's important to you and what is happening as a result of that decision. You have a number of people who have received the title Maharat Rabbah. What's going on now?
Well, first, the Jewish community is in desperate need of spiritual leadership, and it just didn't make sense to me to tap into only 50% of the population and to have only men spiritual leaders. That really is the bulwark. That's the foundation of what inspired the development of Yeshivat Maharat. And while it is true, when we started Yeshivat Maharat, there was a serious pushback, and I took that pushback very, very seriously because I think it's important to be open to criticism, to learn from criticism. We moved forward. And after Rabbah Sarah Horowitz was ordained, and Sarah, of course, has been on your show, she's a wonderful, brilliant young woman who has weathered so much and has done so magnificently. We started our school, and last year, in one of the great moments of my life, 3 women were ordained, and they're serving. They're serving in congregations as spiritual leaders, doing all that they are permitted to do within halakha, within Orthodox law, and I'm very, very proud of them. And we need more. We need more women and men, and we need to create a culture that the highest honor within Judaism is to serve the Jewish people, and through the Jewish people to serve the world.
I must say, Rabbi Weiss, I am incredibly inspired by what has happened at Yeshivat Maharat, and I have met Rabbi Horowitz and just think she's phenomenal. I'm curious to know about the really how has she and the other Maharats been embraced within the context of congregational life?
No, they've been embraced beautifully. There is now Maharat, which is the equivalent in Hebrew. It's a spiritual leader. It's one who's a spiritual leader, one who is a decisor of Jewish law, one who is a teacher of Torah, one who is a counselor. There are now women spiritual leaders, Orthodox leaders in synagogues in St. Louis, in Washington, D.C., in Rabbi Shmuel Herzfeld's synagogue, in Rabbi Adam Shire's shul synagogue in Shari Shemaim. That's a synagogue of 1,500 families. And the feedback we get, and I'm overwhelmed when I tell you this, has just been absolutely wonderful. It really is a reflection of probably my cornerstone principle in activism, and that is a true spiritual activist is not the one who necessarily does that which is popular, but does that which is right. And this was the right thing to do. And even though there was a pushback when Rabbah Sarah Horowitz first was ordained, now it is much more accepted in our community. I, in fact, call Sarah, I call her my Jackie Robinson. When Jackie Robinson became the first black ball player, there was a great pushback, but in the end it became one of the greatest stories in American Jewish history. And Sarah Horowitz and the women from Maharat, I believe, will become one of the greatest stories in Jewish circles, and in particular in Orthodox Jewish circles.
One of the things that I think we also have to recognize is the need to have a pluralistic approach. We're not all going to be in the same school. We're not all going to be in the same denomination. I know at the Board of Rabbis we have all the different groupings working together, because we say leave your denomination at the door, so to speak. And I'm reading a story, the Jewish Week has a story on intermarriage, the reality of it. And, we can't simply sit by and say, well, it's a reality and we have to accept it. We want to accept less of it. And the only way we're going to really, I think, make a significant difference is to talk to one another, to see how we can collaborate with one another. We're not going to be better if only one group succeeds. If the Orthodox do well and the others don't, that doesn't, that's not a victory for the Jewish community. That's a victory for one segment of the Jewish community. And I'm just wondering, what do we need to do? How do we get greater communication and cooperation? We're doing the best we can at the Board of Rabbis, but you still have those who, they're only thinking in a very, very limited way. And yet the problems are serious for all.
Well, look, I've seen it in my activistic life. It's so critical that Jews and Jewish leadership and rabbis of different backgrounds, Orthodox, conservative, and Reform, that we work together. I remember in 1994 flying down to Buenos Aires after the Amiyah attack. The Jewish Community Center was bombed and was destroyed. There were 85 people who were murdered then. It was the largest terrorist attack in the exile that is outside of Israel since the Holocaust. And when I got down there, I noticed that Orthodox rabbis were working separate from the conservative rabbis. And I said to them, this attack was not meant for Orthodox Jews. It was not meant for one particular part of the Jewish community. As a matter of fact, not only were all Jews the target, there were many Gentiles who were killed as well. And so we have gathered together to raise a voice for Soviet Jewry, to raise a voice for Israel. But over the years, Joe, I've learned much more. I've learned that it's not just that we work together because we have common interest. I've learned that I, as an Orthodox rabbi, have no monopoly on passionately loving the Jewish people. Many of my colleagues in the conservative and reform passionately love the Jewish people just as much. And indeed, I've learned that we have much to learn from each other. I've learned from the conservative and reform movement the message of universal consciousness, even as I think conservative and reform has probably learned from the Orthodox community the tremendous importance of Jewish ritual and Jewish day school education. So, we are compared to a bird, a dove. A dove cannot fly on one wing. It needs two wings. It needs all of Am Yisrael, just like politically in Israel. Israel is not going to make it with the political right alone. It's not going to make it with the political left alone. It's going to make it with all people, all citizens of Israel, all Jews, all citizens of Israel who care and want to do everything that they can to make sure that Israel will remain strong. Alone, we will not make it. We will only make it if we come together as a united peoplehood.
Well said. Let's go to a call here from Baltimore, Maryland. Mike, on the line. Mike, you there?
I'm here. Good morning, rabbis. Excellent conversation.
Thank you.
Good morning.
I appreciate it. I am a Christian, and I just went over to Israel and, studying the Jewish faith, and I really appreciate what the rabbi said about Martin Luther King and what he said about, the Jewish people in Russia in the 60s. And I think we all got to learn that. I think we all got to participate for activism in our own spirituality in a very respectful way. And I just appreciate what you guys are saying and what you guys are doing. And, I like the black community, the African-American community, to start talking more about Jewish issues and for Jewish people to talk about we have the illegal immigration debate going on now. And but I really appreciate, because I don't think it's taught a lot in the synagogues and in the Christian churches as well, to be active in justice and mercy and compassion for all people, for all humankind.
Mike, one of the issues that I've addressed on many programs is that of persecuted Christians. Because, we were very involved, of course, when Jews were and are being persecuted. Well, it's happening to Christians. And
not the Christians.
Right. And when you pray in the synagogue, you don't just pray for the welfare of your own people. You
That's
pray
right.
welfare of others, and to see what's going on around the world, and to see or hear the silence, to me, is shocking.
Well, tomorrow night, Joe, at our Dr. Martin Luther King commemoration up here in Riverdale, we're joined by the Green Pastures Church and my dear, dear friend, Brother Roger Hamburg. And we actually met together on the streets of the Bronx after Amadou Diallo, after he was so tragically killed. And at the one-year anniversary, we stood together, clergy. When it came my chance, I sang a little bit of Shlomo Carlebach because of my brothers and friends. Please let me sing and say peace to you. And that started a relationship, and the Green Pastures Choir now sing some of Shlomo's music. They've been singing with his daughter, with Neshama Carlebach. They come here. They actually, Joe, you're not going to believe this, they actually let me do a song with them. And so I do Lean on Me When I'm Not Strong. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff.
It's funny because I said to you the other day, are you going to sing on the air? And
there you go. But, Joe, if I may, I'm going to be reading tomorrow night the last words of Martin Luther King's last speech, where he talks about that he'd like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. He said, these are his final sentences, I just want to do God's will, and he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the Lord. I mean, he's echoing there, first of all, the whole, he's echoing so many biblical stories, but the words coming from the rabbis, where the rabbis say, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. It's not up to you to finish the task. But because you can't finish the task doesn't mean that you are relieved from beginning the task. And by doing everything that you can do to make a great difference. Joe, can I give the address of the synagogue?
Of course.
So we're up.
And if I said no?
I wouldn't have done it, Joe. We're here at 3700 Henry Hudson Parkway up here in Riverdale, and everyone is welcome. Joe, why don't you talk a little bit about the wonderful visit? The two of us, I've done so many wonderful things with Joe Potasnik, who is one of the great rabbis of our time. Just the way you carried yourself at the installation of the new mayor, you make not only us proud, I really mean this, Joe, you make the world proud, just in the way you have this talent of bringing out the best in people. God bless you. But, Joe, you and we went to visit. Why don't you tell the story?
Well, I mentioned a little bit last week the tragic, the murder of Menachem Stark. And you and I spoke, and you said to me, we need to visit the family, make a shiva call. And you read the story, and you look at the newspaper account, it's horrible allegations are made. But as you indicated, and rightfully so, accusations should not deter responsibility. Just because the newspaper reported something, number one, doesn't mean it's so. But secondly, there's a family involved. There are 7 children. There are brothers here. There's a father, whatever. And we need to be there for the family. That's the responsibility of a community. And we walked in, and members of the Satmar community who see, the world through their own lens, not necessarily, the same lens we do, but that did make a difference. We're there as part of one extended family. And I thought it was so moving at the end as we were about to leave. They wouldn't let, and I was going closer than where you were going. You were going all the way back to Riverdale. I was staying in the same borough. Well, they wouldn't let us leave without saying, we're going to give you a ride back because you're not going to get on the train. You're not going to get into a car service. We're going to take you home. And I said, my God, it just shows you that when you reach out to the others reach out to you as well. And I walked away feeling that, I don't know if we brought comfort to that family, but they certainly brought comfort to us.
I walked into that night, the two of us walked into a broken home. Joe, I felt so deeply that by the time I left, I felt I was uplifted. Mm-hmm. The Satmar Hasidim, they were so kind, so gentle to us. It was an extraordinary moment for someone to say, "What can I do for you, Rabbi?" I said, "I'm really not sure who I am. Just take me to a train station." He said, "I'm not taking you to a train station. I'm taking you all the way back up to Riverdale." Yeah. The person who took me was Baruch Yitzchak Spitzer. He is the assistant to the Spinker Rebbe, and it was just an extraordinary moment. And we have differences. Yes, we do have differences, but as I mentioned to Rabbi Spitzer, I said to him that my teacher, Rabbi Cook, once said, what unites us is so much greater than what divides us. And in this world, we should not always look for those points of division, but those points of commonality that bring us together. Yeah. It was the saddest of evenings, of broken hearts, but I'm flying from that moment, still yet to this very day.
I want to also thank Izzy Freelander, or is he also known as Shirley Freelander, who gave me a ride back. But it wasn't just a ride back, it was the conversation in the car, and we recognized our commonality. And if you want to have a theological discussion, obviously, we're gonna look at the world differently. But my God, there comes a moment where we need to find that common ground.
No, we brought him upstairs he came up, he was kind enough to come upstairs, the person who drove me home, Rabbi Spitzer, and he walked in, and there were 15, 20 Chovevei students. There were some Marat students, and there was no acrimony. Yeah. It was just offering blessings to each other, words of Torah, words of blessing, words of bracha, and then we broke out in dance.
Yeah. Let me just say this before I let you go. I was doing a commentary, and I told the story that Helen Keller was asked years ago, what happens, what do you think is not having sight, is that the biggest curse? And she said, no, not having a vision is the biggest curse. Yeah. And, you are one with sight and above all, a vision of our people together, fighting for our people and fighting for other people. Thank you, Rabbi Avi Weiss.
I appreciate it, Joe, and you continue your wonderful work. You really are a dear friend, and not only a dear friend to me, a dear friend to all New Yorkers and well beyond. God bless you.
And we're both supporters of Mariano Rivera.
Very much so.
I know. I told him all about you. In fact, the other day, I told about you and Toby. I know. We're going to get you. We're going to get you closer to one another as well. All right, you take care.
It's important for Toby to meet Mariano.
All right,
my wife.
I understand.
Take care.
Rabbi Avi Weiss, founder and president of Yeshiva Chovei Torah and Yeshiva Maharaj.